Okay, so it looks like everybody is settling in and our attendees. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start our slideshow here in just a moment, but I want to remind you that Kevin's going to be sharing some information that you hopefully followed through the email communication that you received from us. But here at College Aid Pro, our mission is to end the student debt crisis by empowering families to shop smarter for college. So really important to us to help you be an educated buyer in this process. So hopefully you will continue to participate in our webinars that we host for you. But as we get started, I'm going to share a little bit about myself. So I am one of the College Aid Pros, and I am here to support our participants and all of our people that work with us here at College Aid Pro, as well as Kevin. I come from an education background. I started this whole process supporting a high school counseling office for 15 years and then became a consultant, and I have done that for 10 years. And so I have seen just about everything out there, and this whole college process on the financial side has gotten crazier and crazier. If you didn't hear last year, it got even a little more crazy than normal on the FAFSA side. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the CSS Profile, which is the other form. But yeah, so I have supported families for a long time. I don't have children of my own, but I'm on exchange student number 20 and 21 this year, living with my husband and I. And actually, a couple of those girls have come back to live with us to go to college. So I've done the international process, which is even more daunting than the domestic side of this. So Kevin, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and kick us off, and I will put the slides up.
Oh, thanks, Melissa. And I'll be honest, my intro is nowhere near as awesome or as long as yours. I'm Kevin Murphy. I'm one of the pros here at College Aid Pro as well, just like Melissa. And I'm a college financial expert. I've worked with about 1,000 families since 2018, and this is all I do. So I'm also for the folks in New York and New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey, so uh, this is primarily the area that I'm focusing on. But yeah, so we'll kick off the slides. As you see our lovely pictures up there. One of the most important, well, I don't want to say most important, but just something that we want to kind of highlight on is that we get that this is stressful, right? We do this for a living, and I can say that at least for myself, it's still a lot. Every single profile, and I just did a profile before this call, it's still a lot, but take a deep breath. You can navigate this. Obviously, we're going to do our best to share some helpful information tonight, but the goal is never for you to basically feel intimidated by anything. We're trying to guide you through this. Do you want to hit next slide? All right, so I'm going to screen share for a second, if that's all right. We encourage every single family create a free MyCap account with us. Now, when you go into your MyCap account, and this is a lovely dummy profile for the sake of today, but you're going to put in your personal information, right? And you can see that we've got information entered here. You want to fill this out as much as possible to get accurate results, right? You put your income information in, taxes paid, so forth. Now I'm going to go back here. And you can see that after putting that information in, what you're going to get is a federal student aid index. Okay, and the student aid index is how much the colleges expect you to pay and the government each year per student. You'll also have an institutional student aid index, which tonight's call is about the CSS profile. That's what the institutional student aid index is. The reason you see a range from the 17,500 to the 30,400 is because some colleges use home equity as they factor that as a resource to pay for college. Some don't. So that's why you see the range there. And just to point a few out, like Boston University here, which a lot of folks from New Jersey's kids go there, I think it's fair. You can see that it's 36,000. They are using home equity. They use 2 times your income. Whereas Princeton, they are not using home equity in their calculation, right? So there's a very big difference in terms of the net cost or the projected net cost at Princeton than at Boston University. But yes, definitely create your free MyCap account. And I would really encourage you to do this before your student applies to college, before you do the CSS profile, maybe tonight, after tonight's call, go create your free MyCap account. All right, let me stop sharing. Anything you want to add to that, Melissa?
No, just it really is important. That way you kind of know where you stand. This is the first step in this process, and you may, we're coming up on some deadlines, and you may want to add a school or two just based on the financial information that you find out by completing the form or completing the MyCap.
And someone just asked, MyCap account. Your MyCap account, our company name is College Aid Pro. So it's your MyCap account, and it's a free account. I just put a link in the chat to where you would create it. You want to put the slides back up?
All right. Okay, get us to
Awesome.
the next slide here. All right.
So financial aid, it's a discount for college, right? So it's a discount on the ultimate sticker price, and the sticker price at a college, or at least the way we're referring to it, is the all-in full freight cost, right? So cost of attendance is room, board, books, personal expenses, you name it. Every single college out there has a cost of attendance on their website, but colleges discount that. Now, how they discount it? Well, it varies based on your financial situation, based on the college, based on your student. One of the types of discounts is a need-based grant, and that's going to be based on your income and assets, right? So the information that you put on the FAFSA, that you put on the CSS profile, that's what's going to determine that. Now, merit-based scholarships, they're based solely on your student's talent profile or academic information. So like GPA, test scores. That's what colleges are using to offer merit scholarships, right? And many, many colleges are discounting costs, 40, 50% for most students who apply. It's just a matter of, if you're focusing on merit-based scholarships, making sure that the school gives merit scholarships, but also that your student fits within the range that they're going to award them. Lastly, and I don't know about you, Melissa, I personally, I never consider self-help as, it's not free money, right? So it's not really something that you should look at and be like, oh, well, that's the way to pay for school. You either have to work for it and pay it back, but colleges do offer a loan to students called the Federal Direct Loan. It's $5,500. And they also sometimes offer students the opportunity to get a job and work on campus and help with the cost. That's called work study. So those, unfortunately, are considered financial aid by the colleges, but I think that we could agree that that's not free money. So that's in a totally different category than need-based grants or merit-based scholarships.
I
Yeah,
always tell everybody it's aid at the time. It's aiding you at the time to be able to kick the can down the road.
yeah,
So, but it is something that you definitely have to pay back.
yeah, with interest in most cases. So
Uh,
I
Lots of
like that.
interest.
I like that. Um, but okay, let's move on to the next one. I would either take a screenshot of this or write this down, but this is one of the most important formulas to know, or important pieces of the puzzle of the college planning process, right? So you go create your MyCap account, and you're going to know your student aid index or your EFC. That's a big step. Now, I mentioned that the cost of attendance at each school, it's on their website, it's on our program or our software. If you subtract student aid index from cost of attendance, that leaves, or that determines how much need your family has. So I'll use an easy example. If the cost of attendance at a college is $80,000 per year and your student aid index is $40,000 per year, you qualify for $40,000 of need. Knowing this, knowing your student aid index allows you to plan properly, allows you to build school lists based on financial fit, allows you to know if you're going to get any need-based aid from a college. So definitely remember this formula, remember how you figure this out. Now, merit scholarships, I kind of touched on a little bit, but important to keep in mind colleges that give merit scholarships, right? So, for example, Rutgers University, they don't typically give that many, if any, merit scholarships, just students who get accepted to the honors college. That's in state here for me in New Jersey. Whereas a school like Seton Hall, they give a lot of merit scholarships. So it's important to keep that in mind, right? What colleges are giving them. In addition to that, where will your student be eligible for them? So where will your student fit within the range that they're actually going to award your student a merit scholarship? Also, some colleges require the financial aid forms, FAFSA, CSS Profile, to get or to award that merit scholarship. So don't skip on the forms. Also, Ivy League schools, they don't give merit awards, right? They're only giving need-based aid. So if you qualify for need-based aid, great. They're going to help with that. If you don't, you're going to pay the full freight. So important to keep in mind. One of the strategies we recommend to the families we work with is have your student apply to a competing college because you can go back and leverage more money out of, let's say, their dream school, and ultimately share that offer with them if it's a better offer. Now, another option if you don't qualify for need-based aid is to think of value schools, right? So to think of CUNY schools, think of Purdue out in Indiana, 45,000 a year. The CUNY schools are 40,000 a year. Another option too is public schools and their honors programs, right? So like University of South Carolina has a great honors program and they give merit scholarships. So that could be of great value if your student gets accepted there. Also, it's an excellent education. Melissa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the #1 public honors college or honors program in the country. So
Hmm.
lots of opportunities there. It's not the end of the world if you don't qualify for need-based aid. It's important though that you don't skip out on the rest of this process. You still do what you need to do, still file the forms, you still try and go back and appeal for more money. I just said all this. That being said, a lot of families assume they're not eligible for need-based aid, and they are, right? So until you do what I said and you go to the MyCap account, you see your student aid index, you look at the cost of attendance, subtract that, you don't know if you're eligible or not. Also important for merit aid. There are some schools that if you don't apply for aid freshman year, they're not willing to offer it to you sophomore, junior, or senior year, right? So you have to do it up front. Also important if you're going to try and go back to appeal, explain a change in circumstances or anything else, you need the forms done. We mentioned federal direct loans. To get the federal direct loans, you have to submit the FAFSA. It's a great baseline in case things change. Now, applying for financial aid. So every single school, colleges or businesses, right? And every single school awards aid differently. So it's important to understand that no two schools are alike and how they're going to give your family money, it's going to differ. Every college requires the FAFSA. So that's almost like step one. Many colleges think of, some of the private schools, competitive schools that are pretty expensive, require the CSS profile. And in some cases, their own institutional form, like Princeton has their own financial aid form. That's on top of the FAFSA. That's not in lieu of the FAFSA. That's in addition to the FAFSA. Never miss a deadline. I'll never forget one of the first years I got into this business, a family came to me, their student wanted to go to NYU. They missed the deadline for the CSS profile, and NYU said, too bad. They had come to me, it was like, I don't know, January or February of the student's senior year. It was very, very late, but that student then couldn't go to their dream school and they would have qualified for a lot of money because they missed the deadline. I'm telling all the families I work with, and this is just rule of thumb. Today is actually one of the big deadlines, by the way, for UNC Chapel Hill. Huge, huge deadline. CSS profile is due today. If your student's applying early action to UNC Chapel Hill, CSS profile better be done by midnight. But also a really good reference is we'll cover the CSS profile, I swear. A really good reference though is Halloween, right? If you get all of this done by Halloween, you're safe. You're not going to miss any deadlines. If you start going after Halloween, then you may start, wanting to track deadlines, go to the college's websites, and so forth. Um, and yeah, sometimes you might get an email from the colleges like submit your FAFSA and stuff, but they are not going to push you to apply for financial aid. This is something that you have to take the initiative and you have to do it. Um, yeah. You want to add anything there, Melissa?
Sounds great. Did all, yep. Answering questions in the chat here for us.
No worries. So
Keep them coming.
guys, I swear we'll explain everything. I know I'm saying FAFSA and CSS Profile. They're the major financial aid forms. Here, obviously, you can see on the screen is the FAFSA. Now, the FAFSA is delayed. As Melissa said earlier, there's some issues last year. This year, they delayed the rollout until 12/1. So December 1st, FAFSA goes live. Prior year is the base income year. I think that that's a confusing way to think of it. So I always say, look at the year your student's graduating high school and subtract 2. So if your student is currently a senior, they're graduating in 2025, subtract 2. Your 2023 tax return will be the base income year for your student. Also, for the FAFSA, the custodial parent is the one who submits the form, which they changed the rules on that a little bit, right? It's technically supposed to be the parent who provides the most financial support. So if you think back the last 12 months, who spent the most on the student? There you go. If you don't already have an FSA ID, after tonight's call, in addition to creating your MyCap account, go on in, right? Create an FSA ID. You, as the parent, need to have one, and your student needs to have an account. They're totally separate. When you're doing this, I suggest taking down the security questions and the answers and the backup code. And this is something that you're going to want to save. You only get one FSA ID, right? So make sure you've got all the information in a safe place. Again, FAFSA 12/1.
All right, so I am going to get started on explaining what the CSS profile is. This is the other form that Kevin has alluded to, and it is actually part of the suite of things that College Board does. College Board, yes, is the company that provides the SAT. So this is another something that they do. So the CSS profile is used by about 250 different institutions, and it went live on October the 1st. So as Kevin said, most of these schools really have deadlines that coincide with their early action or early decision deadline. And so one of those deadlines is today, another one being November 1. So again, that deadline is very, very important if you anticipate getting any kind of aid. So you want to make sure that you have those things. So what is included in the CSS profile? There's a few things that are a little bit different from the FAFSA. It does include home equity, and as Kevin mentioned, it is a different scale for different schools. So looking at your MyCap account can give you an indication of what schools, use that more heavy than others. Also, when we have divorced and or separated parents, we have the non-custodial portion that has to be done. The FAFSA, it is only the custodial parent that is completing the form, but for the CSS profile, colleges want the non-custodial information. So those pieces of information are kept very separate. So the primary parent, the custodial parent, and the student fill out the form, and then the non-custodial fills it out separate accounts. So the information is not intermingled. So nobody is seeing the other person's information. Also, if you are a business owner, there is some more detailed information that you must indicate in the CSS profile. So you want to make sure that you have all of your business tax returns, know when the company was created, what's your percentage of ownership, all these other little things about the business you need to know. Now, if the non-custodial parent refuses to participate, there is a waiver. But also, if there is no contact with the non-custodial, that is another reason you might use the waiver. So if there's been any interaction that does not leave out the non-custodial parent. They can't just decide not to do this. That's not the way it works. Okay. And completing the form does not commit a parent to paying for college. It is just utilizing the information to see what the student can potentially get in aid. So that's something to realize. Just by signing on the dotted line or filling it out does not mean or commit you to paying for anything for college. So it is, the CSS profile is more invasive. It does have many more questions than the FAFSA. So real important to pay attention tonight as we go through this process and understand what those are. So you will be logging in using your student's College Board account. So as you see up at the top of the slide here, you're not going to go to the regular College Board area. You're going to go to the CSS profile area, so it takes you directly into the CSS profile instead of having to find it, through a different means. And then for the non-custodial parents, they will be creating their own account and will be creating it by logging in to College Board with their own account. So let's jump into the different parts of the CSS profile. So the beginning portion of the CSS profile is all of that general information, just name, address, phone number, birthday, all of that kind of stuff. And it makes you verify and re-verify those things when you go through it. So do double check that it's for precaution to make sure that all the right information was entered. So then we're going to jump into where it starts getting a little, more complicated. So we start with the schools that are on the list. Remember, not every school utilizes the CSS profile. You can Google CSS profile schools. You can see the list of schools. I personally like to use the code. To me, it's a little faster. Just look down the list and grab those few schools that are on your list and put in the code. You can put the other information. You can do it by name or state. But then whenever you do that, it is going to show up, and you see in the second column here, the schools that it brings up. So if you have a code, it's going to go directly to that specific school. If you put a keyword of the name of the school, like the Vanderbilt here, anything that has Vanderbilt in the name is going to show up. So you want to, if you're using the name, you want to be very careful that you are selecting the exact school that you want, because notice there are different pieces here. The Vanderbilt School of Medicine, the Vanderbilt School of Law. You don't want to have chosen the wrong thing, because the school will not receive your data. So then you have to tell a little bit about the student status going into that particular school. First thing is, what year are they in school? So most students that are, or families that are on this call, the student is going to be a first-year undergraduate, never previously attended. Even if a student attends dual enrollment, they are this particular thing. They are never previously attended. That's what they're classified as. And so then where is the housing going to be? And then what decision, regular decision, early action, early decision. And so make sure you know what those are. And so then we get into the parent detail information. So birthday, social security number. So you'll notice that social security number is not required for the parent. It's not required for the student either. But this is, we really do think that it's important to not overshare. So we're really only putting in anything that says required. For the student social security number, it's something that I highly suggest that you actually put in, because that is how they're going to connect the student. Most of the time, they're going to ask for tax returns, and so they're going to get it anyway. But for the parent, it's not as much a big deal, but they're trying to match the student together. So you can put it on there or not. It's not a required field. So then again, you see email, state of residency, your highest level of education, again, is not required. We don't want them to make any assumptions, so you don't need to necessarily fill it in. All right, so I've talked a little bit about the required versus not required items. It will, in parentheses, say required if it is required. And so if it does say that, you have to put something in the box, okay? Then there are questions that are a toggle, like a yes, no toggle. If you choose either one, you can only go back and forth between those two. You cannot deselect. You cannot turn that back off. So you want to be very careful and cognizant of watching for the required statement after the questions so that you are only responding to those things that are necessary.
It's the worst, that part. You can't unclick it.
Yeah, you can't, and some people are like, "Oh," and I'm like, sorry. So yeah, so be very, very cognizant. Read carefully.
Yep.
So then we get into the tax return portion, and it tells you the great thing about the CSS profile is it tells you exactly which line item to bring in. So again, making sure that you are using the line items that it says to use. I know some of them may sound weird, but um, that's what it's wanting you to use. And again, you'll notice only line 1Z is required. All this other stuff is not required. So again, paying close attention to those things. When we get to the portion that says how much did MJ earn, so that's the parent's name, from work in 2023, this is information that's coming from your W-2, that box 1 in W-2. And so this is not a joint thing. So be able to, again, read the questions carefully because you want to see, is it a joint lump sum if it's a married household, or are they asking for you to give separate information? So you want to read those carefully. So tax return, this is your AGI that's coming, or I'm sorry, we're on the taxes. So that is line 22 of the taxes paid is what you're wanting to use here. And then we get into, these are different government subsidies. So if you use one of these or have been a part of using that, you're simply going to check the checkbox, or if you, again, haven't, it's not required question. So if you mark yes to one of these, or your AGI is below $100,000, then there is a fee waiver. There is a small fee to submit the CSS profile. So if your AGI is $100,000 or less, or you check one of these items, then the fee will be waived.
Melissa, is it okay if I jump in real quick? It looks like someone or some folks joined a little bit late. I just wanted to throw back in the chat so everyone could see it. How to create your MyCap account, and then also if anything we're talking about right now, you're like, I need help. This is too much. I don't want anyone to feel confused. We do offer free consultations, so I'm going to send that out right now in the chat as well. But I did not mean to interrupt you.
Not a problem. All right. So then we are looking at some of the things here that are a little bit different from years past. So maybe you had other children. And so some of the FAFSA things are a little bit different than the CSS profile. So tax deferred pension. So this is that box 12 that is on your W-2, and there's only certain codes that are used. So it is something that you are putting here on the CSS profile. They request that information. On the FAFSA, it used to be added back to your income. It is not any longer. Also, you'll notice if you have an HSA, then it also asks about alimony. If you have received any alimony, or you have any housing or food items, again, these are applicable in the institution method. Okay, so again, these are other untaxed items. So you want to make sure that if your family has any of these things, that you look through the list very carefully and you know what that information. Okay, so now we get into the area where we are projecting our income, our future income. So obviously we are, starting to kind of round out the year of 2024. So you're probably pretty sure what you're going to end up with for this year. But again, we don't want to overestimate. So, for instance, you don't know about your bonus. So we don't want to, again, overestimate that there. And then look at what you're making and what you anticipate making for the year and estimate those things, but do not overestimate these items. Then it also asks you, what are you anticipating for 2025? Do you anticipate a big jump or change one way or the other? Depending on if you say yes to this, then you're going to get the boxes to fill in for 2025. So again, don't want to overestimate. So then it comes to the parent's employment and your retirement areas. You will notice that the employment portion is not required again, and also to actually check off what kind of retirement plans that you have are not required, but it does require you to have the value of your retirement plan. So then if you do not have any pre-tax, W-2 money, then this is, where that's coming from, where it's asking that. So any of your 401ks, 403bs, those kinds of things, what is that total there? Okay, so when we get to actually filling in very specific information about the particular parent, you want to be very cognizant of this because you're going to list all parents on the CSS profile. So that's both mother and father. And if there are step parents, step parents will be on there as well. So those will be on there, but you have to check a little checkbox. Whose information are you providing on this particular form? So again, the custodial parent is the person that provides the most financial support. So you want to make sure that if you're in a divorce situation, that you're checking the right person, that you're providing information. So if you are a divorced family, you need to know when you separated. So what year you separated, and then if you're already divorced, what year that is. And that's one of those questions that, it's not required, but it's helpful in this particular situation. Now, when it asks you questions about the other parent, you don't want to offer false information. So you may not know this information. So the best thing for you to put is unknown. And if it's a dollar amount that you have to put in, then just put 0. Let the other parent answer those questions on their portion when they complete the CSS profile. So you want to make sure that that's their responsibility to do that. So, and also you don't necessarily know how they're going to react and what exactly that how they're going to support your child. Some families have a very cordial relationship and co-parent very well. Some do not. So, but this is one time that you probably need to work together. So if there is child support, you need to indicate that, and it asks, received or, do you give any? So those are things that you need to have with you. So whenever you get to the housing portion, this is when you're going to need your mortgage statement. So when did you purchase your home? What was the purchase price of your home? What is the current value of your home? So this is something that you would need to look up. And we don't want to overestimate the value of our home. This is something that we help a lot of families with in this process, is figuring out what the appropriate value is, because we don't necessarily want to put the top dollar here. That's not the whole point of this piece of this. We want to just give valid information, but not overestimate that piece. And so if you owe any money on your home, you want to make sure that you, again, coming from the mortgage statement, and then it asks your monthly payment, but again, that is not required. So you can bypass that question. So then we get to the assets. So assets come in a couple different areas. So we first have cash checking and savings. So this is kind of your everyday money that you are using. So you want to make sure that you are accounting, and this is a joint effort. So if you've got multiple, two parent household, this is a total of those things. And then it asks about your investments. So investments can be money markets, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, CDs. 529s are investment accounts, and they are parent accounts. Okay. If you have real estate other than your main primary home, that is an investment. All of those things are investments. So you would say yes to this question. And then it breaks it down. It breaks down the different types of investments. So just general investments. Do you have real estate? Do you own a business? Do you own a farm? All of those things. And so if you answer yes to those, then you have more details to share about those things. So if you have property, it's going to be very similar to your primary home information. You're going to have to respond to those questions. Also, is it rental property? So how many months a year is it rented? Those are things that you will need to know for any rental property. So if there is a trust, this is another thing that it asks about. Does the student have any investments? Do they have a trust? So you have to answer that, and then you're going to be given more details if you have those things. Okay. So you need to respond to those. So if the student has cash checking savings, obviously that is something that you would fill in there. And then if they've got other investments, that's going to populate. If you say yes, it'll populate that question, and you've got to complete that. Then you've got to answer all of the trust items, making sure you know what kind of trust it is. Is it a revocable trust, irrevocable trust? So those are things that you need to know. Student resources. So how much are you, or will you pay? Are you willing to pay or will pay for your students' college education? So again, we don't want to overindulge here, but we need to think about, if you have a 529, divide that by 4. What does that look like for you? It needs to be a reasonable amount. You're going to be expected to pay something. Okay. So figure out what that would be for you. Oops.
I just want to throw something in here. That number doesn't mean too much, but you do have to, as Melissa's saying, put a good number in there. I just don't put the amount that you plan to borrow. So as Melissa said, like take your 529 divided by 4, that's fine. But if you plan on taking student loans, do not put the amount that you plan to borrow in there.
All right. So what other resources does the student have to pay for college? So at this point, we don't know if you're gotten any scholarships and grants and so forth. So most of the time, this is going to be zero. So if you have an employer that pays for part of education, obviously this is something, but you may not know exactly how they pay or what that looks like, or it may be based on some special criteria. So if you don't know exactly how that's going to play out, the best bet is going to probably be a 0 here. Also, relatives can change their mind. They may not like you tomorrow and may not give you a dime. So things happen. So we don't want to overestimate the resources out there for the student. All right. So then we get to the special circumstances. So this means you're getting towards the end of the CSS. Um, you have special circumstances. Many families may have special circumstances, but we typically say that it's best to hold on to this for the appeal because we want to see how things play out. And then we go in for an appeal. So that way we know how much the needle actually moved based on that circumstance. Okay. So we typically save that for later. Then we have supplemental questions. Okay. So supplemental questions you will notice are not required. They're kind of crazy questions, some of them. One that is new this year, it is some schools are asking about the major. So that might be to your benefit to answer that question because there might be supplemental scholarships that are departmental that the financial aid can award a student. So in that case, that would be something that you might want to answer. I suggest that you do because of it possibly being tied to other scholarship dollars or grant dollars through departments. Okay, so now you get to the end and you have the opportunity to review your application prior to actually submitting. Highly suggest you going back through, making sure that you didn't miss something, but you'll see it kind of looks like a little invoice here. I always tell families the first school is $25 because there's an application fee plus the school fee, and each school after that is $16. So if you checked one of those items that I mentioned earlier, or you have an AGI of 100,000 or less, then those fees are going to be waived. Otherwise, you need to click on the pay and put your credit or debit card information in. Once you do that, then you're going to get to the final page and you'll see that little link up there at the top that says save a copy. You want to save this PDF for your files. It's great to have for future reference, and especially when we go in to do the FAFSA and just again, for your records, you want to have that. Okay. So you want to make sure that you have those things. At any time, you can go back in and add colleges. So if you decide that you're going to add a college, also if you want to do this in increments, if you want to do a couple colleges now and pay for them, and then when you get others, in a few days, pay for them, however you want to do it. If you know all the deadlines are, pretty much coming up on November 1, then just do them all. But you can go back in to add a college. So also down at the very bottom here, you will see what we call the iDoc. This is another service part of College Board that many of the schools that use the CSS profile use. And this is to gather the financial documents and other personal documents from the family. So you will see a list of those schools that don't use the iDoc at the bottom, and then any school that is not on that don't list does use the iDoc. And so that would be the next step of this process. And we will be talking about that at a later date. So kind of to hit the high points of the CSS profile. So number one, do not feel that you need to answer every question. You only want to answer those required questions. I gave you a couple of instances when you might want to go ahead and answer a question that is not required, but overall, you don't want to overshare. Also, you don't want to overvalue your residents. Look at what that resident, look on different sites to see what that value is, and don't overvalue that. Also, you are not going to include 529 as a student asset. Student assets are assessed much higher in the formula. They are the beneficiary of 529s, but parents are the owners of the 529s. So you want to make sure that you put that as a parent account. Also, as we stressed, don't overstate what you intend to pay for college, and all those other boxes like the relatives and things like that. And don't overestimate future income or future earnings. And deadlines, 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 deadlines. You have to meet those deadlines or you're not going to be looked at for these opportunities. So as we close out tonight, as we mentioned, this is can be very stressful. We're here to support you in this process. Kevin, you want to share a little bit about that before
Yeah,
we get into
absolutely.
some questions?
Absolutely. So yeah, definitely put some, and you guys have been keeping me busy, but put some questions. At this point, you can put them in the chat. Usually we say the Q&A, but we've gone the whole meeting doing it in the chat, so it's fine. Yeah, we offer free consultations, right? So some families want our help with this. It's a lot. We touched on a really good amount of the process tonight, but feel free if you're looking for more help to schedule a free consultation. Even if you just have a few additional questions, feel free to do that. I'm going to put the link back in the chat so you guys can do that and register. While I'm doing that, I would love if anyone could give a thumbs up, even a thumbs down, to see how we did and how we're doing. One of our colleagues is big with, we have some emojis, awesome, big with emojis, and it's always fun to see those pop on the screen. I just put the link to consultations in the chat. Um, I'm just going to mention this real quick. I know I mentioned the UNC deadline. I know at least one person's student is looking at it. Admissions is October 15th. It's always been October 15th. It isn't showing on the website right now in terms of for the financial aid, but just check your student's school list, check what deadlines those colleges have. Just make sure you don't miss anything. Thank
Yeah.
you, everyone. Um,
One of the things I always like to share with families is you want to know when that priority, even if you're thinking about doing regular decision, or a school may only have regular decision, I always say Google name of school, scholarship priority deadline, because you want to get your applications in by then, because you don't want to miss out on potential dollars for that. So really important. And I'm just kind of going back through some of the questions. Somebody asked about the FSA ID. Kevin answered that, your student and only one parent needs to have that. I will tell you, last year I had several circumstances where one family or one parent didn't work and we had to uninvite that parent, and the other
yeah,
parent we had to invite. And so I personally think it's a really good idea for both parents to have that, just in case it doesn't stop you, because it does take up to 3 days to clear the Social Security Administration to get your FSA ID. And that way,
right.
literally, you can just bang it out and keep on moving forward and not have any issues. So that's kind of a hiccup that I saw personally with several clients last year. So I just say it's a good idea for everybody to go ahead and have it, so we don't have
That's
any.
a really good point. Really, really good point. I ran into a couple of different circumstances, but circumstances where people have actually provided the wrong social. And if you provide the wrong social, then it goes to create the account. And then that has to be corrected. Good point. Sorry, keep it simple. Good point. I would say that mom, dad, create those FSA IDs. Is this application similar to the FAFSA? Are you referring to the CSS profile? If you're referring to the CSS profile, it's way longer, way more in terms of questions, more invasive. They ask about home equity. that doesn't get filed on the FAFSA or doesn't get reported on the FAFSA. They ask about way more detail. So I guess, would you say it's similar, Melissa? It's
I
a
mean,
financial
it's a
aid
lot of,
form.
yeah, it's a lot of the same information, but again, more in depth. Because especially if you have a business and it asks more information about retirement
Yeah,
accounts and things like that, it's just higher level. It's they want more information because majority of these schools that do CSS profile are private universities. There are a handful of publics, but they have these purse strings that they need to open up and share, and they want more information from you to be able to say, "No, we're going to give you some of that money."
yeah.
So they control that money, and they want to know that they're giving it to deserving people. So yeah, it's a little more invasive.
Great point. Um, if you're married filing taxes jointly, do we have to create separate IDs on the CSS profile? No, right?
No,
You don't even create an ID. You fill out the CSS
yeah,
profile with your student's College Board email and password. So
yeah,
no to that question. When you don't apply for an FSA ID as much as create an account. All you do is if you create it, you have to wait, like as Melissa said, like 3 days for the Social Security Administration to verify everything. Your daughter could just log back in and her account should be verified. She would use the same username and password that she used to create it, or her email address or phone number to log in. Do you want to take any of these questions?
yeah. So one of the oops, goodness gracious, I'm gonna stop
That's
sharing.
Melissa's lovely sister, Jennifer. She's with us as well.
She did the presentation with me last time, so I had her
Yeah,
slide, moved it
yeah.
around to add Kevin's slide in. So yeah, let's see
So the
here.
next one we're on is, should CSS and college app be sent in the same time?
So most of the time your CSS coincides with the same deadline. So no, like Kevin was saying, today is October the 15th for some schools, and then we have November 1st is a big
First, yeah.
deadline for a lot of schools. So those schools that use the CSS profile, we get them in based on when applications are due.
Uh,
That's our philosophy, and many of them that's their deadline.
yeah, great point. Um,
Yeah.
Ivy League school requires CSS profile. All the Ivy Leagues typically require the profile. Princeton has their own financial aid form. Check the school's financial aid website. College Board also has a list of CSS profile schools.
Yeah, you can Google CSS profile schools and you can see the whole list. You can, and there's multiple columns of what they require. And you can even see those schools that require the IDOC. So you can do that. So one of
I
the
just threw
questions,
that in the
if
chat.
perfect,
Yeah.
if you are married and filing separately, um, so both, so on the FAFSA, you are logging in, you're each going to be invited and do your login. But on the CSS profile, you're whenever you have to check a box saying that you're married filing separately, and you're all going to do your information inside of that CSS profile. It's just you're just going to have separate boxes, and each parent will have to do that.
Do
So
all
yeah,
private colleges require CSS profile? No. No.
no.
Seton Hall, Monmouth University, private schools don't require the CSS profile. Hobart William Smith doesn't require. Sorry, I could go on and on. They don't. Not every private college. The list is in there in the chat for schools that do. At the same time, purpose of the application. There's not advantage or disadvantage. It's required at some schools. So if they're requiring it, it's not optional. It's you will have to do it. The advantage, well, the advantage is you're going to get financial aid if you qualify. If you don't file it, you won't. If the school
There,
requires it.
yeah,
Um,
so there are many reasons why to file your financial aid forms, as Kevin kind of mentioned at the beginning of our evening. Um, number one, there are a few schools that require it for merit-based aid,
yeah,
period. Okay. If you want to do an appeal, and ask for more money. Many schools will say, I'm sorry if you didn't fill out the financial aid forms, we're not even going to consider giving you more money, because they want to make sure no stone was unturned. And Kevin also mentioned about change of circumstances. Unfortunately, I've had to work with a lot of widows in this process. It's and it's just a devastating time in a family's life to deal with that, whether it's a death or a major illness. I've had a family that I worked with last year that the mother had a stroke, and her, mom and dad were even breadwinners of the family, and totally devastated their family. But had, we not applied originally for the financial aid forms, 2 years down the road that happens, and some schools will say, I'm sorry, we're not going to even consider any change of circumstances. So there are many reasons why to do it. And then if on the FAFSA portion, if you want loans, many families don't realize they need loans or want them until end of June or July. And by then we're in a time crunch. And so it's just much easier to do it,
Yeah.
and have it. It's insurance, for anything that's going to potentially happen in the future, and have those things. It doesn't hurt to do that.
You're married and filing together, is it separate profiles? No. If you're married and you honestly, if you're married for, it doesn't matter. If you live in the same household, it's it's the same CSS profile. That's how it is. And for the FAFSA purposes, same FAFSA as well. Um, does it hurt other parents' information? You have to submit a waiver. And if you submit a waiver and the school approves it, then no, it doesn't hurt. If they don't approve it, then yeah, it could stop you from getting need-based financial aid. To get approved for a non-custodial profile waiver, no contact support, and also abuse, right? Like those are the basic ones. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Melissa, but they are pretty strict with that. Like you have to actually apply to get that requirement waived.
Yeah, it's you have to jump through a number of hoops. I had a student that unfortunately her father molested her and he was in prison, and that's a very legitimate, thing there. And so there are lots of, strange circumstances that could allude to that, but you have to it, it's a tough one to get through. It can't
Yeah.
just be because they don't want to go through this process.
We're coming up at the end of the hour. I'm gonna throw back in the link to schedule a consultation in case anyone wants to take advantage of that. Um, and then if we have any last questions that come through, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, we're glad you
So
guys.
the free consultations can help you decide whether you want further services. We also have in your software, you can click up there and you can book an appointment with any one of us for an hour. You can pay for an hour to work with us on, hourly basis, but we also offer packages to help with families through different processes. So please reach out to us, and if you feel that you need support in this process.
Oh, good point. I honestly, thanks. In terms of hourly, like if you have a CSS profile halfway done and you have a question, you don't want to mess up on it, that's a great way. Again, everyone create their MyCap account, create your FSA IDs, but you could go right up there in the top of the program and top of the software and book time with Melissa or I, and we can go over that with you. That's a little bit different. Free consultations, or if you're looking for us to help you with this whole process, right? Like if you've got complicated circumstance or an unusual circumstance or just tricky, right? We can just basically take it for you from here to the finish line. So that's the difference between the two. And thanks, Melissa, for pointing that out. Doesn't look like we have any more questions right now. So, all right.
All right. Well, it was great being with you this evening. Continue to check out our webinars, and we will somebody, either us or somebody, will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. We really enjoyed it. Thank you.